All right, so I wanted to do a supplemental video for 12.4 because 12.4 notes actually cover everything that you need to know in 12.3 and 12.4. The only thing is that there's a couple of extra things in there that I typically teach that I didn't teach in 12.4, so I'm going to bring those situations up. One of the things I say in the beginning of 12.4 is I show something like this, right? So I give all of these names. Like the 3 right here is called the power. And we also know them as exponents. The x is what we know as the base. And the 2 here is what we know as the coefficient. Okay? So all of these things are important to know, okay? So from there, now what we want to do is give you guys some definitions of, like, for example, keep that in mind. We want to know what a monomial is. So some of these have different terms. Monomial, okay? Now monomial means, so mono means single. So this is just a single term. Oops, not term. Or one term. Okay, so some examples of what one term might look like, it could be as simple as 5, 2x, 3x squared. Okay, these are all just one single term. Okay, so what's next? Well, we also have binomials. Binomials is 2 terms. What are some examples of 2 terms? Well, combining any 2 of the single terms. So like 2x minus 5. 3x squared plus 2x. So there is 2 terms. So if you notice that terms are separated by addition subtraction signs. Okay, let's do another one. Let's say we talk about trinomials. So if you notice so far, mono means 1, bi means 2, and trinomial would mean 3 terms. Okay, so like a 3x squared plus 2x minus 5 will be 3 terms. So again, terms are separated by addition subtraction signs. So that's, if you need to figure out how many terms there are, that's what you would do. Now, what if there's more than 1, 2, or 3 terms? Now, these are actually just special names, and it lives under a big umbrella called polynomial. Okay, so polynomials is basically everything. 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms, 6 terms, 7 terms, 8 terms. They're all called polynomials. Monomial, binomial, and trinomials are just the special names that we typically use more often. So these are all under the umbrella of polynomials. Okay. So another thing that they're going to ask is, what's the degree of each term? Okay. So typically we let me see here. So typically you might be given an example like, I think examples are easier to talk about, so let's do it that way. So example, let's say it says 9x squared minus 3x plus 8. Okay, so this is called a standard form. So let's talk about what a standard form is. So the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So if you notice what happens with the powers, right? It started at a square term, right? Which is so-called the highest power. Then it goes down to the first power because there's always an imaginary 1 right there, okay? With the 1, we don't really need to show it. So So that's why it's just there. And then you notice the C doesn't have an X. Why? Because X to the 0 power is equal to 1. So C times 1 would just be C. All right, and we wouldn't write that. All right, so I guess I would do it this way. How about if I put it this way? AX squared plus BX to the first plus C times X to the 0. Okay, so if you notice, actually, it'd probably be easier if I just make all of these purple as well. Not what I want to do. There we go. All right, so notice that the power goes from highest to lowest. Okay, so we always want to put it in standard form. So if there's an x cubed, then the x cubed would go first. Right? If there's an x to the fourth, then x to the fourth would go first. Okay? So in this case, if they ask you what is the degree of the first term, so degree of first term, you will say 2. If it asks you the degree of the second term, you would say 1. And the degree of the third term, it would be 0. Okay? So again, where did I get those from? So I would get those from here. 2. Let me do it this way. 1. And the 0. Okay? So the last question they're going to ask you is, what's the degree of the polynomial? Okay? So the first term would be talking about just that term right there. The second term, did I use green? Yep. That's the second term. And then the third term they're talking about is that one. Okay? Now that they're talking about polynomial, that means the whole thing. Well, the degree of the polynomial would be whatever the highest degree is. So in this case would be 2. Okay? So that is some of the things that they might ask you. So they might also ask you about missing terms. So let's say that in an example, they say, hey, I got 9x to the 4th plus 5x plus 2. Okay, so let's say they give you that, right? So if that's the case, well, typically we would want to write it with x to the 4th, then x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, x, and then, or x to the 1st, and then x to the 0, right? So that's what we typically want to do. So whatever the highest power is, we want to write it down and down and down all the way to 0 power. So in this case, we have 9 for that. We got plus 5x to the 1st. And we then, over here, we got plus 2, right? So that is where those are coming from. So let's do that. So here's the 2. Here's the 5. And here is the 9, okay? All right, so all those match. So what am I missing? I'm actually missing this plus 0 and plus 0 here because those are two so-called missing terms. So what are my missing terms? So missing terms would be x to the 0. That's not 0. How about x to the 3rd and the x squared, okay? Does that make any sense? I hope it does. Other than that, that's about the only thing that, extra that you need to know so that you can actually do 12.3 and 12.4. But I would suggest that you watch this video and the next video before you start 12.3 and 12.4. All right? I hope this